What's up, everyone? Welcome to Hometown Horsepower. I'm Scott Fritz along with my brother Steve. On this episode, we discuss the old topic, build it or buy it. And sometimes that depends on this, and your skills. Either way, you're going to have fun, so let's hit it. Welcome back to Hometown Horsepower. I know you watched our first episode, which was just an introduction to our YouTube channel, but now we're getting into the main features. This episode is called Build It or Buy It. Now let me walk you through this. You know, nowadays muscle cars come from the factory with 400 plus horsepower, but you could buy a turnkey factory warranty and drive it anywhere. Well, there's other options. You can buy a slightly used car, drive it, have some smaller bills, do your upgrades on the weekend, and you do this in stages that could be easier on your budget. Or you can buy what I call a project car, building something from scratch. Now, I get asked all the time, Scott, how do I start my project? And I always say, you gotta plan it out. Step number one's the most important, period. You gotta find the car you want to build. Don't settle for anything that's sitting around. I know it got you through high school. I know it got you through delivering pizzas, hopefully through college. And maybe you had a special moment with a significant other in here, and it's special to you. But really, do you want to make this into your muscle car? Think about that. Yeah. Go find the car you want to build. On to step two. Step number two, drive it. Just keep it clean, have fun. Don't jump into any project until you listen to my step number three. Just because you got a rust hole in the fender doesn't mean you need to strip it down and store it in a barn, never to return again. Step number three, research and plan. You can use a ledger, you can use paper. I use Excel spreadsheets. I'm a fanatic with that. I'll go through and figure out all the different wheel combinations I can use and camshafts, and I'll have pages and pages on this, what the prices are from the manufacturer. I'll use eBay and Craigslist and classifieds and swap meets. Just do your research on this stuff. You also got to think about what are you going to do with this car in the future. What tools you're going to need. Can you do these repairs yourself? Or what can you afford? You also got to think about comfort versus performance. This car went from comfort and slowly started to go to more performance, and now my wife doesn't want to drive with me anywhere in it. Step number four, the one no one wants to talk about, budget and financing. I know. My wife has called me many things, but never a financial wizard. You need to budget your project. You need to make it fair for the family. You do these builds in small stages. This month is that, next month is this. These small steps, while you're still driving the car, trust me, you'll get there and you won't go broke doing it. Or have your wife chase you with a frying pan. It still hurts to this day. Now, this is the story of a 2006 Mustang that is a prime example of a budget build. Stage by stage, each winter this car was upgraded and now has a heart-pounding 830 horsepower and 790 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. We're going to go through all of its stages, from a V6 automatic to a 5.4 Navigator engine with a 5-speed manual transmission, then to a takeout 2008 GT500 engine, and then to this creation, a forged internal 5.4 dual overhead cam GT500 engine on E85, putting out about 20 pounds of boost. I bought this car used with about 14,000 miles on it. It's a 2006 Mustang V6 automatic, easy payments with low-cost insurance. It was my daily driver for many years. While I was driving it, I started to modify it, such as moving the battery to the trunk. I installed a used 8.8 axle, some takeoff GT brakes, also installed a dual exhaust system. But meanwhile, in the background, I was building this, a used 5.4 dual overhead cam navigator engine I was going to install later. I made a prototype intake manifold made from some scrap sheet metal. It was a cheap concept of a pattern I was going to use later. I mocked up some radiator pipes, started collecting the front drive belt accessories, and in one weekend, I removed the V6 auto, installed the 5.4 nav engine just to mock it up. I had to put the V6 back in because Monday I had to go back to work. I checked if the intake manifold cleared the hood, radiator hoses and heater hose connections, the power steering lines, AC lines. A lot of these parts were used takeoff parts I found on eBay just to keep the cost down. Now, once I knew the engine would fit, I cut aluminum pieces out for the intake manifold. I taped them together so my buddy wouldn't have to piece it back together before we welded it. It just makes it easier for him. I used a lower navigator manifold with a 2006 4.6 3-valve GT throttle body. I got a used GT ECM, and I started to make the engine wiring harness. I got an 8-bolt flywheel installed. I found a used 5-speed transmission to put behind this engine. I found some used Shelby GT500 headers that I had to modify slightly to install them on this engine. Both the Navigator and the GT500 engines are 5.4 displacement and it's similar in height and width, but the intake and the exhaust ports are slightly different. But before I installed this engine for good, I wanted to make sure it ran. I wanted to make sure it would idle, and I wanted to speed up the process by getting it tuned on the engine stand. So I made an engine stand that I can start it, make sure there's no leaks, no knocks before I installed it in the car. So here's a video of the engine running on the stand. Some people say, why didn't you buy a GT in the beginning? Well, I wanted something different. I mean, just look at this creation. No one else had this setup. It was truly a one-of-a-kind engine. I challenged myself, and on a budget, built this awesome setup. Once I put some miles on it, tuned it the best I could, make sure there was no leaks, no knocks, the trans was shifting fine, it was time to take it to Lydio at an Alternative Auto Performance for a dyno tune. It made 385 to the rear wheels. I was happy at that time for what little I put into it. Here's a video of the dyno pull. Well, while I was driving the car, I started to think of how to add a power adder to it. I bought a taller hood for extra clearance, a Roush front bumper to allow for more air for an intercooler, but I wasn't sure if I was going to go turbo or supercharger. But I found this used GT500 supercharger, and I started to design the way to make this fit the Navigator engine. When I was looking for a lower GT500 intake, I came across this used GT500 complete engine on eBay. The price was too good to be true, so just in time for Christmas, Santa came through. And a special thanks to my wife. So that spring, out with the nav engine and in with the GT500. I still used the 5-speed manual transmission. It was an easy swap. Most of the front belt accessories swapped over. I could reuse the headers. And just with a little rewiring needed to be done, well, okay, I went overboard. I ended up relocating the underhood fuse block into the trunk. Now, this may look scary to some people, but to me, it's a walk in the park. It makes the engine compartment look cleaner, and now I know exactly where every wire goes to. The captain of a ship should know where every bolt, every weld is at. All right, back to the dyno. Ended up making 577 horsepower and 530 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. Now, this was the bone stock GT500 engine with just a smaller supercharger pulley and some headers. I drove this car a lot, but in the background, I started to collect pieces for my next upgrade. My goal was to build a 1,000 flywheel horsepower engine using a stock GT500 supercharger. I needed to get forged pistons and high-performance rods and big camshafts. I found some used Cobra Jet camshafts. I got some Manley 10-to-1 pistons, Manley H-beam rods. It already had a forged steel crank. I found a 2013 GT500 supercharger, which is the Eaton TVS 4-vane 2.3 liter with a 2.4-inch underdrive pulley. And I also got a 10% overdrive ATI balancer, which together should make about 20 pounds of boost. Some big 100-pound fuel injectors, 2 fuel pumps to feed this beast. I found a used TR66 6-speed transmission. I figured out a way to prime this engine since it doesn't have an old-school distributor drive oil pump. Very important to prime a new engine before firing it up. I wasn't going to take any chance with this one. So next winter, in with the forged internal engine. I had this roll-around engine stand to make installation a breeze. No need for a hoist. I installed a tubular K-member, and I still kept the AC system intact. I installed a big twin 75mm throttle body and a JLT cold air kit with a 155mm mass airflow sensor. So back to the dyno again. But Houston, we got a problem. It went lean, way lean. Not enough fuel. It's just too small with the returnless system. We stopped at 5,000 RPMs not to hurt the engine, but it started to make some big numbers. So back to the garage with a plan. We're going to take out the spare tire well, and in goes a 20-gallon fuel cell for E85 fuel. I used 2 Walboro E85 450 liter per hour fuel pumps with 2 8AN E85 fuel lines, and the return line was a 6AN. Both fuel pumps sat in the rear of the fuel cell in the sump, and a vent hose went out to where the fuel filler neck once was with a rollover valve. It needed 2 fuel level sensors so that the cluster fuel gauge read properly. And up front, I installed big fuel rails by 4 Engineering, 1,000cc fuel injectors, a boost regulated fuel pressure regulator by 4 Engineering, all for E85 fuel, the poor man's racing fuel. 85% alcohol is the way to go when you're making big compression and big boost. So back to Lidio at Alternative Auto Performance for the last dyno tune. Okay, this is it. Boom! Over 830 horsepower and 790 foot-pounds of torque at the rear wheels. Now remember, this car started out as a V6 and slowly became this blue monster. And this is a great example of a build-it project. Yeah, it took over 5 years to take it to this stage, but this wasn't an affordable way. And I kept driving it through spring and summer. Now, next up is a new paint job at Triple R Collision in Carroll, Michigan, because this body is worn out. And thanks again to Lidio at Alternative Auto. Thanks for watching this episode of Hometown Horsepower. It's burnout time. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, visit us on Facebook, hit that like button, and share with your friends and family. Our next episodes are on a 72 Big Block Chevelle and a 69 Big Block Roadrunner. See ya!